class. Hope everybody's doing great. Just wanted to go over activity 4 and go through it step by step to make sure that, well, hopefully I can answer any questions that you might have and make it a little easier for you. So for activity 4, the objective is to understand how and why we develop effective employee training programs. So there's a big difference between just any kind of employee training, like I'm sure you and I have done at work before, and one that's really effective. And so there are things that we can do to increase the likelihood that any training program that we're doing is going to be more effective. So this module is really going to give you a deep dive and take you pretty far into the process of instructional design. So with that, just know that there's a whole class actually, and I teach a class on training and development. So there is so much to learn about this topic, and we are really just skimming the surface. But my hope for you is that through this module and the others, that I'm giving you a specific skill so that, you know, down the road, maybe this is something that you can use or you can draw from. So let me walk you through the steps, and we can take it from there. So like I always say, the toughest thing is getting started. You can check that off right now, because here you are, step 1, watching the video. I wanted to let you know that for this activity, you will need to think about a topic, a training topic. And I'm open to whatever works for you. Just like before, we've used an example organization or an example, job position, right? Well, for this activity, you'll need to think about something that you can train people on. So any topic is fine. I recommend thinking about whether you can use your current organization as an example. And the only reason is because it needs to be something that you're very familiar with. Because there are steps where you're going to need to assess where employees are, the knowledge, skills, and information that they currently have, and you're going to need to compare that with what would be ideal for them to have. So you really do need to have, pretty in-depth knowledge about this subset of employees. So the closer you are to it, I think the easier for this will be. With that said, I'm open to, if you want to make it something fictitious even, I think that's probably the last resort, but that's an option that's available to you. So you're going to need a training topic, and the step 2 is to watch a really interesting TED Talk kind of on the difference between, what a lot of people think as training, which is more like orientation and like, just basic, I don't even really know if it's basic, it's just ineffective, right? So he does a really good job of kind of explaining the difference between real training and development and what goes on in most organizations. So go ahead and take a look at that, and then you're going to explain a little bit about that. Then activity 3 really starts the process of what we're doing. So the first one is or step 3, but the first step of the 5-step process that I'm going to take you through. By the way, this 5-step process is one that you can use for developing any type of training. So that's why I say that my goal is to give you this skill so that you can use it later on, and hopefully, come back to this and draw from it if you ever need to create any type of training module. Okay, so step 3, you're going to watch this YouTube video, and it's about something called the ADDIE model, ADDIE, and it's a 5-step process for creating instructional design. And I'm going to take you through each step. So step 4 is A, right? It's an acronym. ADDIE is analysis. And what you're going to do for this one is you're going to actually perform a needs assessment. Now, a needs assessment is something that if you were really performing this in HR and as an employee or a manager in HR, it would be a much more in-depth process, right? This in and of itself is like, we could spend a whole week talking about this. So this is like a very abridged, Cliff Notes version of it. just to give you a taste of how this process would be. So what I've done is I want you to read the book. There's a section of our book that explains a needs assessment. And what you would normally do is create like a survey, and you would send it to the subset of employees. And by subset, I mean not all the employees necessarily in your organization, right? But let's say you were targeting this training program for the marketing department, or even a subset of employees within the marketing department, new hires, let's say. You would send, one way to do a needs assessment, I should say. There are other ways to do it. You can interview them to get this information. But one way is to develop a survey and send it to that subset of employees and collect the data and aggregate it, and then, you know, do an actual analysis, like you probably learned to do in stats, on this data to determine what's called a performance gap. That means a difference between where the employees actually are in terms of knowledge, skills, and abilities and where they should be. And you could, well, there are a lot of different ways to do it, but for this activity, I want you to, there's a needs assessment that I posted, a template that I posted on Cougar Courses right under the activity, activity 4. And what I want you to do is fill it out with the assumption that this is the aggregate data. Okay, so you're going to fill it out like this would be all the data you've collected, what you'd expect to see, because you're familiar with the job, you're familiar with the subset, and I want you to kind of have in mind a performance gap that you already know is there. So you're filling out this needs assessment like you would think it would look. And of course you wouldn't do that in real life, right? We would just send it out and see what the data said. So here we're kind of, you know, rigging the data, I suppose you could say, but I want to take you through this step. I don't want to skip this step because it's so important. So I just want to be clear that the way you would use it in real life is a little different than how we're using it here, but I wanted to include this step. And you could take this needs assessment template and you could turn it into a survey and you could do an actual needs assessment. So for that, that's step 4, and that's what you're going to be doing. And step 5 is now you start to think about, okay, well, given this performance gap, and again, a performance gap is the difference between where the employees are and where they should be in terms of knowledge, skills, and abilities. And now you try to turn that into, how can I design a program, or how can I create, you know, what do they need to know? What's the gap? And so in this step, I want you to think about that and start to think about learning objectives. And a learning objective is just a target that you expect for someone to get out of what you have, whatever training or activity you have. So it's very specific. It's exactly what you want them to learn. And I have room for you to create 3 of these. We're just gonna do, you know, think about one activity, or maybe 2, like a combination of 2 activities that you could put together to teach someone something. Step 6, I have, this step is where you actually develop the activity. So you think about, you know, should it be a case study? Should it be a simulation? So I have a couple very short YouTube videos for you to watch. And here you're basically putting together an activity. So are you going to have a demonstration and then a quiz afterward? How are you going to teach them, you know, whatever you set out to teach them in your learning objectives? So what you're going to do for step 6 is watch those 2 YouTube videos. And then there's also a bit of an explanation in your book on page 40 and 42 about adult learning theory. And then you're going to use the template that we've created for you on developing a training plan. So it's like a lesson plan, but this is a training plan, and it's 2 pages. It has room for you to actually put 3 activities, but you only need to do 1. But it's important because it really keeps it targeted. And that's what I want you to focus on with this, that you're developing that activity based on that learning objective. So for step 6, your deliverable is going to be that template, that 2-page template, and you're gonna fill out the beginning, which already has information that you've put the learning objectives, which you've created in step 5, and your explanation of the performance gap, which was in step 4 or step 5. And so there's some information that you'll have already done, but that template is really important for completing and turning in, and it's something that hopefully you could use again. Then for step 7 is implement, and again, remember, this is the acronym. We're following the ADDIE process, so ADDIE, and here we're at step 7 is implement. And so here you're just going to describe what it would look like, right? You're going to use your imagination, you're implementing the program, you're going to explain a little bit about it, and I have some questions, so specific questions for step 6. Step 8, super important process or step, and something that's often missed and overlooked, but it's evaluate. That's the last step of ADDIE. And you're going to learn a little bit about the Kirkpatrick model for evaluating. It has you evaluate on 4 different levels. And the levels really go from most basic type of evaluation to kind of the highest order, the most rich, which is results. And so I would like for you to think about a way in each level, very simple way. So just give me like a few bullet points, right? Your evaluation doesn't need to be a lengthy one. It can be a very simple, question or 2 questions, or a method that you have for evaluating. So I would like for you to try to think about evaluating your activity on all 4 levels of the Kirkpatrick model. If you really can't think of one, that's okay with me, but just know that if you are really working in HR and this is your job, it's really important to be able to justify to executives what this training produced in terms of ROI, right? They're investing money into this training, and so for you to be able to articulate results that you've gotten from employees will help you be able to justify it monetarily and say, this training program led to this increase in results. And of course, here we're not fabricating the data. You don't need to come up with the results. Just tell me how you would measure it, results-wise or transfer of training-wise, right? How would you identify what employees are getting out of it based on each one of these levels? And then step 9, you are watching another interview conversations with a CHRO, and here it's Susan Peters of General Electric. And she has some really interesting points, and you're going to answer these questions. And then finally, your last step is to answer a few questions about the activity and what you learned. I hope that helps. As always, I am here if you need anything.